Look at the gladiator, Ronan, and is this Cyclops' brother? So guys, how are you? I hope you are well. I am the Monio, the interdimensional demon that talks the most about X-Men 97 on YouTube, and you are on my channel. And after the fateful Shi'a episode, we have a transitional episode, which takes place at the same time as episode 5, so the narrative doesn't move forward, but we learn what happened in parallel with the events of episode 5, and I must say that it was very interesting things. We had the participation of many characters from the cosmic part of the X-Men, mainly Shi'a, and also a focus on the Storm and Forge arc, with the arc of Storm recovering her powers, and I have some criticisms, but I'll talk about it in a moment. But one thing that I find interesting about these two stories being shown in the same episode is that in a way, they both share the same theme, which is colonialism, but in one we see the point of view of the colonizers, and in the other the point of view of the colonized. But talking about the episode itself, we have the problem of Shi'a, who doesn't accept that Lilandra gets married and rules alongside her beloved Professor X, who is in conflict because at the same time he wants to stay and love Lilandra, but he can't deny their origins, they're children of the atom, and this episode presents us with a scene that goes to the essence of the character Xavier, and shows us why he is Professor X, beyond everything that Professor X is and represents, above of all, this he is an educator. While Magneto prefers striking speeches with emblematic phrases, Professor X prefers to take everyone to a classroom and give a lesson on colonialism, and this makes perfect sense with what the character is, putting the education as the main tool to overcome prejudice and discrimination. Professor X teaches about colonialism in a very simple and didactic way, showing that the Shi'a Empire achieves its power by absolving other people and their cultures, and that is why it has so many people of different races, being very different from the Kree Empire for example, which has an ideology aimed solely at its people, being almost supremacists, so much so that in the original animation, they are villains and the Shi'a Empire is treated as the Empire of Good. The addition of more layers to Shi'a was very welcome in this animation, as we see that although they have a beautiful narrative, that they bring together other people and do not destroy them, we can see that in practice. In the high domes of Shi'a they are not big fans of the idea of diversity. But as much as the pacifist lesson that Professor X was very cool, I didn't quite understand if he really hoped to convince everyone there, and change the way of acting of an entire empire that has centuries of tradition, and really despite the class being very didactic and many truths having been exposed, the empire's authorities were obviously not convinced so easily. Perhaps the only one who was convinced was Lilandra. She was the only one who seems to have understood and reflected on Professor X's message, and she will probably apply this during her reign, which probably won't make the most purists happy. So I believe it is quite possible that in the second season of the animation we will have an arc of civil war in Shi'a, between those who want to embrace this pacifist stance or who are simply loyal to Lilandra, and the others, who will try to take power and dethrone Lilandra. And an interesting thing about this scene is that there was clearly some external interference in the mental link that Professor X made with those present, mainly because we see a purple energy forming just before Xavier had all those apocalyptic visions, and probably that moment it happened at the same time that the two genes felt some type of interference in their telepathic powers, so this phenomenon probably had the same origin. I've also seen some people interpret it as simply Professor X feeling that Gambit died, but I think there's more to it than that. One thing that I thought the direction of this part did very well was showing the consequences of Xavier's attitude. When he says he needs to return to Earth, Lilandra could simply take him home, but she makes a point of saying that if he left, the things that were said against him would prove true, as he would not have absolute loyalty to the Shi'a Empire. The other part of the episode is dedicated to the arc of Storm regaining her powers, and I say that I didn't really like the way it was done. Even though the final scene was sensational, the entire narrative until we get to it is a bit rushed and too summarized, but I don't think that's the main problem, because since the episode intersperses with the parts with Professor X, it gives a better feeling that you are only seeing snippets and that there was a passage of time but we didn't see it, and you can even understand Storm's conflict, but it was done in a way that doesn't give me the genuine feeling that she learned anything, and it had a development arc in itself, as it all came down to the idea of facing your fears and being able to fight against them, and this is a somewhat broad and generic concept, which is to show that beyond that laser that hit the Storm, there was something psychological involved that blocked his powers, and this concept was very well used in the film Spider-Man 2. Here I thought there was more time to explore it better, and I won't even delve into the fact that the villain is very little explored, and she's just there at that moment and in that place, as a narrative tool for Storm to have a conflict and serve as a trigger for her to regain her powers. I'm not saying I didn't like it, on the contrary, I liked that. Ending with the Storm putting on the classic outfit was sensational. You can feel that whoever is making the series really is a big fan of the X-Men. We can see this in every reference, Easter egg that they put in the animation. And now talking about theories, a lot of people speculated that in fact Magneto didn't die in episode 5, following that rule that if the body wasn't shown, then he didn't die, and I confess that I wasn't really believing that, but during the vision apocalyptic of Professor X, Gambit was played but Magneto was not, and come to think of it, I think it would make perfect sense for Magneto to be alive, since he is playing the role that was previously the Professor, but when the Professor returns, he would fit more into his old role, which is that of antagonist. And this makes perfect sense with Magneto's journey in this animation. He genuinely tried to be a pacifist and do things the way Xavier did, but in the end this resulted in the brutal attack on Genosha, and I believe that this motivation would justify the return of Magneto as the main villain, and although previews of the next episodes have already established that Mr. Sinister is in the story, I don't think he will be the final villain. I believe that this role will be Magneto's. Furthermore, there are also some previews of promotional material for the series, which show Magneto in his classic outfit, so I think there are two possibilities, or there will be some temporal plot, which brings Magneto back, and that would justify Cable appearing in the episode 5, or simply that Magneto actually survived. And I think this possibility makes a lot more sense, because if you use a time travel story to reset everything that happened, all these events that we saw in the last episodes lose their weight narrative. It would actually be quite disappointing, knowing that everything that has happened so far doesn't matter much because it will conveniently change. So for anyone who is a fan of the villain Magneto, I believe you will be happy if everything is confirmed. Another thing that I think will happen is Storm becoming leader of the X-Men, as it would be a natural path for the story to follow, as there is this phase in the comics, and considering that Cyclops is very confused and going through very difficult times because of your son, I believe there is a great chance that Aurora will lead the group in Scott's place, and that would be incredible. In the comics this happens even before she regains her powers, in a dispute she has with Cyclops to decide who would lead the X-Men. Overall, I thought it was a great episode. Obviously it didn't have the same impact as episode 5, but that's normal. Even the best series ever made have calmer episodes, generally to develop and prepare things that will come next. But what about you? What do you think will happen? Do you think we will have Magneto as a villain and Storm leading the X-Men? Leave it in the comments, and if you liked the video, subscribe to follow the next content. Until next time my people, demonic hugs.